July 2022 has come and gone, and there were no earth-shattering news releases about the James Webb Telescope discovering signs of alien life. But, as you can see from this picture here, which includes data from what the James Webb Telescope released to the public in July 2022, there was actual data that was exactly related to what I predicted in April of this year. As you can see on the left, the title of these two experiments that were performed in the middle of July. Now keep in mind, the James Webb Telescope isn't even supposed to be done with calibrating and all of that in the month of July. Look what it decided to look at during the middle of July and release just within a matter of days to the public, which you can find on this website exactly as I've shown in this screenshot, that it looked specifically at TRAPPIST-1, but not just the TRAPPIST-1 star. It was looking at the planets and the atmosphere of those planets, exactly on schedule, as anticipated. Now here's the data on this screenshot, and it's an enormous amount. I have tried to spend some time going through this data, but it's a massive amount, and it seems as if NASA decided to bury people in just a bunch of data and drown them with 99% garbage in the data so that they couldn't get to the little jewels of what we actually want to find out. Is there life on TRAPPIST-1 or TRAPPIST-1b or TRAPPIST-1c specifically? It is very likely here, as you can see. The problem is that I am not a full-time scientist in this field that can spend all of my time calibrating this data against the TRAPPIST-1 star to make absolutely certain that this data does in fact show near-infrared spectroscopy showing that there's oxygen on TRAPPIST-1c. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for the two PhD research groups that are in Denmark and in Montreal to come up with that answer, and they have been buried with a bunch of garbage in this data that I don't know if NASA did it on purpose to make it so it would take them longer to sift through it to actually get to the real, is there life on TRAPPIST-1c or not. I'm very disappointed, as you can imagine, that NASA did not have the courage to just come out and say it, but instead they just wanted to technically fulfill their obligations of where they stated, yes, we will reveal this in July of 2022. And I guess this is another bureaucratic thing where they technically fulfilled that obligation because it was out into public domain, as you can see on this screenshot, in July of 2022. But they technically didn't promise that they wouldn't bury it in a ton of data garbage to make it very difficult to find, such that these two poor groups of grad students could take a year unpacking it all before they reveal that what they got back in July of 2022 this year is actually the sign of alien life on TRAPPIST-1c or TRAPPIST-1b. It appears that it's going to be TRAPPIST-1c where this data really originates around. I really had wished that the government of the United States had had a bit more courage in this, but considering that NASA was going to do a reveal of James Webb Telescope data, and then the White House at the last second swooped in and decided that they were going to do some reveals themselves and sort of steal the show, but also completely rearrange scheduling and who was going to talk about what, really means that there must have been some kind of panic or snafu. According to some of my sources, that is essentially what happened, and that they lost their nerve. They were too afraid of the consequences that they may suffer if they actually let the public know this, and instead revealed some... Technically, they did reveal something quite earth-shattering, that an exoplanet that shouldn't have oxygen or cloud vapor in its atmosphere did in fact have all those things. It was a gas giant near its star. So that is quite earth-shattering in terms of what we think the habitable zone for a planet should be. That information, I think, went pretty unnoticed, that dramatically expands what our quote-unquote Goldilocks zone should really be. But that's neither here nor there, because that's not what was scheduled to be released. What was scheduled to be released was some clear, definitive sign and scientific data from the James Webb Telescope to the public that there is indeed life in outer space that we can detect in some way. And I believe it was in fact done. The obligation was technically fulfilled so that NASA or any other affiliations working with NASA didn't get in trouble. They did release this. It's just, I really wish I could be the one to sit here and tell you that I have found the signal and that I've done all the work to be the one to publish this, but I know that I'm not really supposed to be that person. I have a lot to do on my plate outside of this kind of stuff anyway, so even if I wanted to do this, it would just, with the amount of garbage that they threw into these files, it would take me months. And I'm sure it's going to take someone months of going through this before they finally figure it out. And if you were to release this data and try to sensationalize it without really confirming and calibrating everything properly beforehand, the scientific community would probably be instructed by NASA to sort of condemn the release of this information, saying that it's not real science, it hasn't been calibrated and verified and cross-checked with background sources of radiation, blah, 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 to essentially debunk and do a character assassination of whoever released that information without being sort of vetted, so to speak. These two groups, I hope, still have the green light to be allowed to analyze it and let the public know the data is out there. If it takes too long, then I will undergo the process of analyzing this, but I make no promises on how long this is going to take for me to figure out. I really, really, really hope that somebody else does this instead, because I have what I feel are more important things to be doing. Either way, there you have it. I'm a bit frustrated about this myself. I really wish that I could tell you in some clear-cut, definitive, black or white way about whether or not my prediction was true or false. And unfortunately, I can't give that to you at this point. It definitely looks very suspicious in terms of how everything lined up exactly. In terms of them technically fulfilling the requirement. So long as, they also made sure that people wouldn't be able to actually look into this data and find the smoking gun for at least another year, which appears to be the case, which just means basically I'm stringing myself and all of you along for another however long until this finally comes out that yes, in fact, TRAPPIST-1c does in fact have oxygen. And the reason that's so important is if TRAPPIST-1c has oxygen, and it's in the so-called quote-unquote Goldilocks habitable zone, which we now know is bigger of a region than we thought before, then you've got a planet that's got the right temperature for liquid water, and it's also got oxygen. And oxygen is not something that is readily generated by the natural geologic processes of a planet, because oxygen tends to rust out of the atmosphere into, say, rocks. So if oxygen is present, it's constantly being generated by something that is basically producing an energy gradient chemically speaking. And the only thing we know of that would do such a thing is life. So essentially it would be a very, very, very strong indication that life is on TRAPPIST-1c. Now, there are things closer to home that are producing oxygen that have sort of been swept under the rug, and I think it would be a little risky for the government to come out at this time and sort of acknowledge that, yes, there is in fact somewhere much, much closer to home that has oxygen that they said didn't have oxygen, i.e. a place that actually has a blue sky but was originally shown by NASA to have a blue sky, but then they quickly said that that wasn't right, and then showed a sky that was pure red, which we also know now is total nonsense, because that sky of that very nearby object is always sort of grayed out and shown to be a bland gray. And you'll notice that none of the pictures from that place ever have any blue in the picture, as if the blue's just been filtered out. The reason that's important is a blue sky usually indicates the presence of nitrogen and oxygen, which this place is not supposed to have. And if it had oxygen, then it leads you down the rabbit hole of why is there oxygen there? Well, because life is producing it there. And then you get into the idea of, well, then there's a place that has life that's really nearby. Why did you not tell the truth about this? Yada, yada, yada. And a lot of dominoes start falling. If NASA is this worried about how they're releasing information such that they are being a little cagey even about their TRAPPIST-1 data release obligations, then you can see how they are way too terrified to go closer to the truth of where alien life actually is, and how close to us it is, and how ubiquitous it is throughout the universe. Now again, you don't have to take my word for it yet. I would recommend you to search yourself and to try to search and verify and validate and falsify different claims. So if you've read between the lines about what I just told you, I just gave you another claim outside of TRAPPIST-1 that you can probably piece together what I'm saying, figure out for yourself pretty quickly that there are many different ways to verify outside of official sources that tightly control the narrative of what I'm talking about and what must be true there. If you are less curious and you just want someone to tell you what the truth is, unfortunately, it looks like you're going to have to wait a bit longer. All I can do is sort of string you along with this very tantalizing piece of information that clearly indicates that the James Webb Telescope did, in fact, fresh out of the box in July, swing itself and point itself at TRAPPIST-1, not to study TRAPPIST-1, the star itself, but to look specifically at the atmosphere of the planets in the TRAPPIST-1 system. And why would that be the first thing that they would do in July of 2022? Well, I am strongly convinced, I'm highly confident that I understand the answer to that question, but I wanted to be able to present that to all of you first. Unfortunately, that's going to have to wait. The prediction, so to speak, has technically probably come true, and this is the only evidence that I can give you at this point. So hopefully we'll eventually get there. If you want to be on the forefront of knowledge, you're still going to have to roll up your sleeves and do the seeking yourself to find out what's really going on. The truth is out there. We're slowly eking our way towards mass public awareness on this topic. But anybody's guess as to when we're actually going to get there. So good luck. Strap yourself in. It's going to be a very interesting future.